Welcome to our podcast, Raising Bigs. This podcast is an ongoing conversation between myself and my young adult son. We're ready and willing to talk about all the things families might experience in their lives and relationships, both as parents and young adults, from teens to 20-somethings, the good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly. In this episode, we're each sharing how we approach a new year with a new mindset. After spending years making New Year's resolutions, trying to execute and failing, along with watching so many others do the same when I worked in the fitness industry, I've been playing around with new approaches over the last few years, visioning and dreaming exercises, setting intentions, goals and action steps, calendars and routines. I've tried it all. The new year has always felt like a fresh start, but I wanted to be excited about my trajectory toward the best version of myself this year. I wanted to be moving into closer alignment with my personal values as I pictured who I would be after the next 365 days. I believe you're either growing or you're dying. I refuse to accept the later, so growth it is. Let's dive in. I'm Marcy, and I'm the mom.
I'm Kate, and I'm her kid. My mom has inspired myself and my siblings to be lifelong learners and not to accept the status quo for ourselves. You can start moving toward the best version of yourself at any point in time during the year. It can be at the beginning, the middle of the year, or even on a random Tuesday. But now is definitely a great place to start. There's so many promotions, so many people talking about the new year and maybe a new version of them or the improvements they want to make. So now is a good time. There's new energy and a new feeling kind of in the air that can kind of push some of us to reach our goals a little bit better. So, Mom, I know you and a couple of friends have tried something new this year when it comes to kind of your vision for the year, goals, resolutions, whatever you want to call them. What did you usher in this year so that way you can have the best year yet? I know you said kind of you and your friends have done something with that.
Yeah, so this year totally went off script, and we did something called the 12 Magical Nights, which involved 13 wishes. So I did this with two girlfriends of mine and did it separately with them. So we went through a process of identifying 13 wishes that we had for our life in the new year. The key was they all had to be something that we could make happen. And then for the 12 Magical Nights, each night, we would burn one wish and we would release that to the universe, because the universe, the powers that be, God, the collective, whatever you would like to call it out there, actually is going to take that from you and going to worry about the who, what, when, where, why, and how. You probably still have to take action on those 12, but that is not yours to focus on. So what was yours to focus on? We started on the 20th of December. And so that meant on January 1st, after 12 Magical Nights, we took the 13th wish out of the jar. And that was the one that was ours to execute for this year. So it really was an exciting 12 nights for us. Like, we really got into this, coming up with our list of 13, which happened in the weeks leading up to the 20th of December. And then every day we were in touch with each other about, oh my gosh, how are you feeling? We were so excited about pulling these wishes out of the jar. And then what really felt good to me was, rather than having this overwhelming list of 13, was being able to release 12 of them out into the universe. So when I opened up my last wish, that then allowed me to look at kind of my process for planning for the new year. And I have always done a vision board. I'm doing something different with my vision boarding this year. And I'm actually doing a bingo card. And I'm doing a bingo card that is wrapped around my word of the year. So I always choose a word every year. That word changed as part of the 12 Magical Nights process when I pulled out my last wish. On the 13th day, what I thought my word of the year was going to be was replaced by something that was a word in that wish. So it was just really fun to have a new ritual, a new way of approaching the new year, and just really felt good to release a lot of the things that could have become boxes that I would have just checked as the year went on. But I decided to put the list of 13 wishes away for the year. I'm the type of person that would like to kind of track, okay, universe, God, the collective, what have you delivered? Highlight them as they happen. And one of my two friends invited me to actually put the list away and not look at it again until the 31st of the year. So I'm choosing to believe that's part of the magic of this approach. You know, world's kind of a crazy place right now. So having something just kind of magical and a little bit woo-woo out there was fun. And then changing up my vision boarding routine is fun for me too. And having one thing to really focus on, which will, as we kind of look at things, will then drive all of my other wishes and open up capacity for those. So how about you, Cade? What was your approach this year?
My approach was just kind of a It was a very mental kind of approach. I didn't really I made a little list in a notebook I have of some things I wanted to do this year, but I didn't really sit too hard to think about, oh, I want to do this resolution or set a super hard goal. This year, I kind of was looking at it in more of a broad perspective. I was just kind of looking at my life as a whole and seeing what I can do to make it better, what I can do to prove what I'm doing, what I want to change, what I want to stop doing, what I want to start doing, and not necessarily doing a process kind of like you did, or creating a super strict list, or coming up with a super strict routine, or things like that. A lot of it was just in my head. I have the routine I want to do every day in my head. I know the things I want to accomplish this year. And in my head, I know, how I'm going to get there, what I'm going to do. So this year, I think, kind of like you mentioned at the start of this episode, is sometimes I think we get so caught up in writing down our goals and writing down the process and writing down how we're going to get there, that sometimes that I think takes away from actually doing it. You can spend every day of the year creating a workout plan, but if you never go to the gym, that work is never going to get done. Or you can spend a whole year talking about how you want to make $100,000, but if you're not going to work every day, if you're not picking up those side hustles, you're never going to make $100,000. So sometimes I think just society as a whole can get caught up in making lists and making routines and making plans and not doing. So this year I wanted to really focus more on that execution and just kind of waking up every day and saying, okay, is this making me healthier? Is this contributing to my success in school? Is this making me money? Is this, the different goals that I have, just kind of thinking about if what I'm doing this year is reaching those goals. So that's kind of been my process this year. But I think and I know, we've talked a lot about it, obviously, off the show, about what we're doing this next year. But I think just in general, it's interesting to hear what people are doing for the year. And some people have goals. Some people, like are doing a bingo card. Some people have different manifestations are doing. There's so many different things. And I think it's cool to see what people are doing. And it's also important to understand that everybody's doing something different, and what works for them might not work for you. There may be two people who have the same goal to save money, but they're going to have two completely different paths to get there. But it's really just finding what works for you and what you're able to get the most benefit out of.
I love how different our ways of approaching it were, and how we have both approached this year a little bit differently when we have in the past. And to me, the beginning of a new year, or any time during the year when you've decided you're going to pivot and you're going to change something, is all about hope and joy, and an infusion of energy, right? Into positive energy, into what sometimes can just feel like the slog of life or the hustle and grind, which you all know I unsubscribed to a while back. And so I love just that we've each approached it in a way that works for us, because we're not the same people as much as we are alike. So
Mm-hmm. For sure. So kind of speaking about us being different, you're definitely more of kind of like a free spirit, go with the flow kind of person. So what tools do you use to keep yourself on track? When you're looking at, kind of the 13 wishes you talked about, that one wish that you're left with, what are you doing to keep yourself on track? What are you doing to make sure that, every day you're doing something that aligns with those goals?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I do, I still keep a paper calendar, unlike most people. I have my electronic calendar as well on my phone, my digital calendar. But my paper calendar turns out to be more of kind of a to-do list, but not to-dos in the traditional sense. What I'm doing on there is trying to make sure I have things like white space. I have things like my morning ritual. I used to call it a routine. I no longer do that, because it is a very, very spiritual practice for me. And in order for me to be able to bring to fruition the wish that I am charged with making happen this year, I have to be focused, and I have to pay attention to kind of where my connection to the higher power lives, how things are feeling in my life. Am I aligned? Is there balance? Or am I feeling overwhelmed? And if I am, I need to address that. And so keeping myself in check really happens in that morning ritual. Like, okay, how am I feeling? Do I need to spend a little more time meditating? I'm doing a book called The Artist's Way for the first 12 weeks of this year, and it involves writing 3 daily pages. So I have been a journaler for years, but I am sitting down every morning and I am writing 3 pages in my journal. It can be anything. It can be a brain dump. It can be complaining. It can be dreaming. It can be all kinds of things. But it doesn't even matter if you just write, I don't know what to write, but you're going to fill 3 pages every day, right? And so that is a really good way for me to keep myself in check and to call out what feels like the right next move for me today. I think sometimes we get so overwhelmed by the big picture of where it is we want to be at the end of 365 days that we forget to realize we don't need to see the whole path. We need to know where we want to go, but we don't need to see the whole path. And we need to really listen to our own internal voice to find out what is our next right step. So that's what I do to keep myself on track is I use my paper calendar kind of as a to-do list, making sure to plot out those things that will help me to get where I want to go. I also sometimes just kind of wander through the house looking for what are the things that are bugging me or niggling at the back of my brain or taking up space in my head that is stopping me from being able to do the things I want to do. And so I will actually take care of those things first. Like right after the first of the year, we had both your brother and sister stay here at different points during the holiday. And it was driving me nuts that the beds weren't made in the guest rooms. And so that I got up one morning and that was the second thing I did after writing my 3 daily pages was to make those beds because it was bothering me and it was taking up space in my mind. And so I did that. And then that released that energy and that space in my brain to move on to do the things that I want to do. So Kate, I know you're more disciplined and routine oriented individual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I would rather die than have to get up at 5:30 in the morning and go to the gym. But literally people I wouldn't rather die, but not something I would choose or something I would be successful at executing most likely. So how do you go about as a more routine based individual holding yourself accountable for the things you want to do so you can achieve your goals for the year?
Like you said, I'm definitely very routine oriented and just kind of a creature of habit overall. So I think one thing that's really helped me in staying disciplined and staying on track is just viewing the changes I'm making as part of my routine and not as an addition. I think sometimes if you focus on, okay, this is the life I was living, but now I'm going to start eating healthier. Now I'm going to start waking up earlier. Now I'm going to start going for a walk after work or whatever it may be. I think when you kind of look at it as an addition, it's easier to take it away versus I'll just look at it as if I decide I want to wake up every day, that just kind of at 6 a.m., 5 a.m., whatever time it is, that just kind of becomes a non negotiable. And it's just, okay, at 6 a.m., it's time for me to get up. Or if I decide I want to save $200 from each paycheck into my savings, I just transfer it and I say, okay, there, it's transferred and it's saved and it's done. So I think kind of just what works for me, and I know this won't work, like I know it would not work for you to just say, okay, I'm getting up at 6 a.m. and that's the way it's going to be. But for me, just kind of turning those things into non-negotiables and just making them a part of my day. The same way you wake up in the morning and you brush your teeth, the same way you pet your dog when you walk in the door, those things that you kind of do just naturally. I like to just implement the things I want to change into my routine just naturally. So if I'm going to say I'm going to get up at 6 a.m., I'm going to get up at 6 a.m. every day. If I'm going to, eat healthy, I'm going to make sure every week on Sunday I'm cooking the meals that I need to cook so that way I can eat them throughout the week. So I think just kind of adding those things into my routine and just making it seem like it's normal and like it's non-negotiable is what really helps me, because the second I think, oh, I'm going to start taking the dogs for a walk after work, that's just going to keep getting pushed back and pushed back. But if I say, okay, work is done and now it's time to walk the dogs, then it is what it is. So that's what works for me.
And I love that you put the adding things in. The opposite side of that, right, is taking things away. Like so many people are like, I'm not going to drink anymore in the new year. I am not going to eat dessert more than 2 nights a week.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about all the things they're not going to do. Or, like you said, they try to add on a bunch of things. And our brain can really not focus on adding or changing that many things at a time. So, had I put all 13 wishes down on my list and thought that I was going to be able to focus on all of them and execute on all of them, I would not have been successful. There are some people who are very, very checklist oriented and driven and could pull that off. I am not that person. And I like how you framed it up that you just make that your new normal. It's not about adding or subtracting something. It's about making it your new normal. I really like that.
Mm-hmm. So we kind of talked about, staying accountable and staying on track, but how do you handle it, Mom, when you get off track? I think it's kind of unrealistic to think, okay, I decided I'm going to take a walk every day after work. I'm just using that as an example. I know it's getting repetitive, but it's unrealistic to think you're just going to do that every day and you're never going to have, a slip up or never going to have a day where you're not feeling it. So how do you handle that, Mom, when you've gone off track and maybe are shying away from your goals or not staying on track with where you thought you'd be?
I think the first thing is to realize that life happens. number one. And there's going to be some things that may make you lose focus or that you have to focus on instead for a period of time. So I think accepting the fact that sometimes you have to respond to what life deals you, and that may take you a little bit off focus for a little while. I try to sit and remember why this thing was important to me anyway. So for instance, this 13th wish, why was that important to me? And if I can remember my why, that will help to give me the fuel I need to pull myself back on track if I have fallen off. If things like scrolling social media takes time away from what I'm trying to do, if something like sitting outside in the sunshine once the weather warms up, we just had a huge storm here, if that starts to take time away from me achieving what I want to do, it's not that I'm going to say to myself, no, don't go sit in the sun. But instead of doing it for 2 hours with a good book, I'm going to say for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to set my timer on my phone and I'm going to go do that. So allowing myself to indulge in those opportunities, right, that come forward, or to give myself some grace when life throws me some crap and I realize I've gone off track, remembering my why as to why it's important. And then again, listening to that still small voice. What is one right thing I can do right now that moves me closer to my goal? Because then you're going to build up momentum. Momentum isn't something that you just have inside. Momentum is something that will be created through repeated actions. So if you can take one small step, kind of like I use this when I help people to declutter and reorganize. If you can do one shelf on the closet, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that one shelf looks so amazing. You didn't want to do it. You didn't want to start. You've been looking at that closet for a year and you haven't done a darn thing, even though you wanted it decluttered. But if you can do just one shelf, you're like, ooh, that feels good. And pretty soon you find yourself doing the next shelf and the next shelf. And pretty soon that closet is done. And you're like, ooh, that junk drawer in the kitchen, that's really bothering me. Let me go there. And you build up momentum and you're working closer to the goal of having your house decluttered. So that's how I get myself back on track, is just to try to, build up that momentum by taking that next right step.
I think that's good. And I think it's important to, like you said, kind of look at it as one step at a time. It can be scary to look up the whole staircase and see how far you have to go and see everything you need to do. And kind of like you said with the shelf example, is it gets you started. And like you said, you see that shelf and it's like, oh, that one shelf looks amazing. So now let me see what it looks like when all the shelves are, decluttered and organized and cleaned. And I think it can be the same thing too. If you, let's say, don't want to go work out, like once you get there and you realize, okay, I feel good when I work out and it makes me feel good, and then whatever it may be, or if you're going to eat healthy, you really want that McDonald's, you don't want to eat chicken breasts and potatoes for dinner, but you end up having that and you think, oh, this meal was actually really good and it was really filling and it made me feel good. Whatever, apply that to whatever goal it is. As long as you start and take one step, sometimes I think it helps you to kind of look at the big picture and say, oh, this was a good choice. Even though I didn't want to eat the chicken breast tonight, I'm glad I did because it tasted good and it, is good for me and things like that. So I think taking those one steps at a time and just taking the small actions definitely help. And I think it's also equally important to, kind of like you said, have those indulgences where if you're, trying to eat better, it's okay to have ice cream every once in a while. It's okay when you're at the baby shower to have a cookie or two. That is not going to throw you that far off track. And I think it's just important to remember, then the next day, then you get back on track and it doesn't become a habit of, okay, now I'm having a cookie every day and then I'm having 4 cookies every day. And then I'm, losing track of my goal. So I think that it's important, even with the shelf thing, you don't want to then go back to cluttering the shelves because then that just messes everything up. So just taking those one steps at a time, but also realizing that it's okay to, you don't have to be on a linear track the whole time.
And if you don't allow those indulgences, I would counter and be like, are you really living life? Because what is life if you can't occasionally eat the ice cream, right? Like,
exactly.
That's one of the big joys in our house. Kate's older brother Sawyer lives in Washington, and in Oregon, there is a creamery there called Tillamook. And I think we have 6 different kinds of Tillamook ice cream currently in our freezers in our house. So my husband and I joke that when Cade moves out and all of his healthy items are not in the big chest freezer, we better keep it just for Tillamook ice cream. But so Cade, what do you tell yourself when you aren't making the progress you planned for? How do you get back on track? What do you do?
I think one thing, it's important to just kind of look at the big picture. When you asked that question, it kind of made me think of like when I was training for my marathons and stuff like that. I would constantly kind of check in and think, okay, I've been training for 3 months. I have 2 months left to go. Where, is this where I thought I would be on track? And then if you are, okay, great, you've been doing the work and, you can either maybe up the intensity of your training or whatever it may be. But if you're not, I think it's important to sit back and realize why you're not on track. Are you not, in my situation, training hard enough? Was I not, was I skipping days? Was I eating things I shouldn't have been eating? Was I doing whatever it was? Figuring out why you're off track or why you're not making the progress you planned for is important, because then you can make those changes that you need to do and say, okay, I've got 2 months left for the next 2 months. I'm, gonna make sure I'm going extra hard during my gym sessions or whatever it may be. So I think that, and I was just using, training as an example, but that can apply to anything. Figuring out why you're not, making the progress you are. If your plan is to save money, why aren't you saving enough money? Is there, some things you could cut out? If your plans are to just overall be healthier, are you making choices that are going to lead you to that? And then also understanding it's okay to change your goal. If you had a goal of saving $10,000 and in July you realize that goal is not achievable, it's okay to say, okay, I'm going to save $6,000 this year, or 4,000, or whatever your, achievable goal is. Sometimes I think when we're making goals, it's very easy to kind of shoot for the stars and, go as big as you can. You could say, okay, I want to lose 200 pounds in a year, and that is not realistic. Or I want to, declutter my whole house this week. That might not be realistic to go through your whole house in a week. So I think it's important to understand that your goals can change and to look at your progress and see if those goals do need to change. And it's not a bad thing. The way I look at it is, with the saving money example, even if you don't save $10,000, you still were able to save $6,000. And that's $6,000 you didn't have saved before. That's, a good amount of savings. So whatever it is, even if you didn't reach the highest goal you started from, you're still somewhere in the middle and you're better off than where you started. So that's kind of what I do when I'm not making the progress I planned for, is look back, figure out why I'm not making the progress, and then change my goal if needed, or change what I'm doing in order to hit my original goal. That's been very beneficial for me.
Yeah, I love that, stopping to reassess kind of as you go, and especially when you notice yourself off track, and then being willing to adjust if you need to. I also liked, it sounded like maybe with, here's what I'm going to do for the next 2 weeks, as you were assessing where you were at and preparing for your marathon, like being able to put those little micro goals, or like for the next mile I need to do XYZ, right, to get me there, makes it a little more palatable, rather than knowing that in October I'm going to run this many miles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I really like that idea of that reassessment kind of as you go along, and knowing at the beginning of the year, or at the beginning of any undertaking, that there will be points along the way where you might have to shift. And it could go the other way too. You could be like, oh, I'm going to save $10,000 this year. And then long about March, you realize you got a promotion and there's a lot more money there. And so maybe you want to reassess and you want to raise that. So it can go both ways.
For sure. I definitely agree. Kind of talking with that, mom, though, if you're not seeing the progress, has there ever been a point, kind of talking on New Year's resolutions, but also just in any sort of task that you've embarked on, has there ever been a point where you've just given up and decided to write it out? If you, with that saving money example, you hit July and you only have $100 saved. Have you ever just said, okay, you know what, I'm not going to save this money and I'm going to try again next year? Any goal that it might be. Have you ever just given up and decided to write it out?
I actually don't ever give it up entirely. So in that example you gave, like it's July and you have $100. Like you said before, that's still $100 you didn't have the last time. And if I reassess, and maybe I'm like, okay, because of things that have happened this year, whether that be medical expenses or you lost your job or things happen, I'm not going to be able to hit that goal. So maybe I need to make a different goal. And maybe that goal shifts from putting $10,000 in savings to making sure that my coin jar is full by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like you can still have that savings goal. It's just that the amount might shift. So I don't really give up, but after many, many years of doing this, I have realized that for myself, I kind of have a soft deadline of Thanksgiving in my head, because just through trial and error, I know that whatever is not done by Thanksgiving Day, as far as what I wanted to happen this year, is not going to happen, because between Thanksgiving and New Year's Day, that is my favorite time of the year. And I not only have additional things to execute for the holidays, right? But I am loving that time of the year. And I am spending more time with my people, and I am decorating the house, and I am wrapping gifts, and I am, just enjoying and being present in every day during that time, playing the Christmas music. So I've kind of got that soft deadline in my head of Thanksgiving. And so if I get to Thanksgiving and there was something huge that requires a lot of time, dedication, I just have to know that, you know what? Just like I could shift a mile marker, right? One way or the other, I can also shift my timeline. So being able to say, you know what, that maybe is not something that is going to get completed in this new year, but I'm not giving it up. I'm just temporarily hitting the pause button on that particular thing and shifting it into next year. Probably it's something I still want. If at some point during the year there is something that I decide no longer fits my life, is no longer in alignment with my values, I will just let it go and kiss it goodbye, right? Like, because you are allowed to change your mind at any point in time. What I don't allow myself to do is ever give up completely. So things might shift, goals might change, mile markers might change, but I don't really give up. A few years back, I did a last 90 days challenge at the end of the year, which was to try to start the new year in the strongest possible position that you could. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that you're starting in on new goals if you're that type of person who sets the goal markers and wants to start them January 1. But like what it meant for me this last year, during the last 90 days of the year, it was really about what are the small things I can do every day that are going to make me strong. And so that looked like focusing on making sure I was getting my hydration in. That looked like focusing on making sure I was going to bed at a reasonable time, that I was trying to get all the sleep, that I was allowing myself to have my morning ritual, even on days where I had a lot of things that I wanted to get done. So it was both physical and mental, emotional, like how was I going to enter the new year in the strongest possible capacity? And so while I didn't give up, I did focus on that last 90 days of making sure I was starting the new year strong.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I handle that want to give up. I know a lot of people do. Long about October, they're like, I'm done. I'm just going to ride out the end of this year. That being said, if that works for you, you go right ahead. That's just not the path that I choose to take.
I think one thing that I've realized, and just a thought that's kind of creeped up in my mind in the past like 6 months or so, um, I do think, life is short and you shouldn't take anything for granted and you should enjoy every moment and everything. But also I do think life is very long for the most part, unless, unfortunately something happens to people at a young age. I think the average age of death is like 75 or 79 or something like that. Being alive for 80 years, you have a lot of time to make changes and do the things you want to do. So if you don't hit your goal weight or save the amount of money or, whatever, clean your house, whatever it is that you wanted to accomplish this year or this month or this week, there's always going to be a next week, a next month, a next year. Again, I know things happen and our time on earth is limited, but for the most part, we don't know when that's coming. So, assuming that we're all going to live for 80 years, you have a lot of time. So, if you're 30 and you had a goal to save this amount of money, you've still got another 50 years to save that money. The same way there was 2025, there's going to be 2026 and 2027 and 28, 29. And so, I think it's important to understand that just because it doesn't happen this year, or if you set a goal within this month or within this week, or even today, if my goal today is to clean the bathroom and it doesn't get done, okay, there's always a day tomorrow. There's always going to be a day next week. So I think it's important to understand that even though life is short and we should value everything, we also have a lot of time on this earth. And kind of like you talked about earlier when we were talking about, you said something like really enjoying life is being able to eat the ice cream and things like that. You've got plenty of time to eat healthy. You have plenty of time to go to the gym. You have plenty of time to clean your house. So I think it is important to do things to better yourself and to reach the goals that you want to reach, but also to understand that there's time to make error. There's time to fall off track. You can always start over. A lot of the goals that we have are in our own head. It's in our own head of I want to make this amount by this age, or I want to buy a house by this age, or I want to hit this goal weight by this time. whatever it is, those are all goals that we made up. Nobody is telling you you need to buy a house by 25, or you need to buy a house by 30, or you need to get down to 200 pounds, or whatever it is. Nobody's telling you that. That's all in your own mind. So it's okay if it takes you longer to hit that goal, to reach those. And I think, kind of like I said, it's that balance of understanding that, but also understanding that every day you should be doing something to get you closer to those goals and to help you reach that.
Well, and if you die young, you're not going to be saying things like, I wish there was more money in my savings account and I wish I would have cleaned my bathroom. Like, those are not the words that are going to be
Exactly.
your mouth. Even when you're old, those are not the words that are going to come out of your mouth. So, you know, I would encourage people who only have what I would call like life's business type goals. If they're surrounding money, if they're surrounding weight, if they're surrounding cleaning your house, if any of those things that on your deathbed you would not give two craps about, right? What are the things that are on your goal list, your wish list, that make your heart sing, for lack of a better word? Like, those are the things that in my head are not negotiable, right? Like, those are the things I'm going to work extra hard to make happen this year. Because while yes, I may live to be 100, nearly 100, as my great grandmothers and my grandmothers did, for the most part, I might live to be that old. But after a certain age, I'm probably not going to have the capacity to go and travel and do the trips that I want to do and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really good point, Kate, that there will always be more time for things like that, especially things that are not going to matter when you're on your deathbed. So
Mm-hmm.
make sure that your list doesn't only include like transactional items, but it also includes experiential items, things that you would be super happy that you were able to do with your life,
Mm-hmm.
those stories that you would someday maybe be able to tell your grandkids or your great nieces and nephews, the things that bring adventure and joy to your life. So Kate, what would you say to someone who has completely sworn off New Year's resolutions? They're like, I am never making another New Year's resolution so long as I shall live, which, number one, we shouldn't say
Mm-hmm.
that because we can always change our mind, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then they've got a niggling feeling in the back of their brain that they want to improve something or make progress in some area of their life. What would you say to them?
For sure. I would say to that is to don't look at it like a New Year's resolution. Look at it like it's just a change you want to make. And for some people, that might look like not making the change until March. Maybe it is March 14th, you decide that you're gonna, change whatever you want to change or improve whatever you want to improve. It doesn't need to revolve around the year. And I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit throughout the episode, but you can make the changes you want to make in January, in June, in September, in October, whenever you want to do it, you can make those changes. So I think if the feeling of New Year's resolution has a negative connotation to you, or you just don't like it, or you feel like every time you try to make a New Year's resolution, you fail, whatever it may be, whatever your reason for not wanting to do a New Year's resolution, just don't look at it like that. Don't look at it like a New Year's resolution. Look at it like you're just doing something to, improve yourself, improve your life, whatever it may be, improve a craft, things like that. Just disassociate it completely from New Year's resolution or New Year's goals or starting the year off right. Any kind of verbiage like that, just get rid of all that and just say, you know what? I want to start painting more, or I want to start saving more money, or whatever it is. Just look at it as something you want to do that brings you joy and will make you feel fulfilled. I think that's kind of the best advice I have. But what about you, Mom?
Yeah, I love the want versus the need. Again, when we harken back to, yeah, there's a lot of things we all need to do, whether that messaging is coming from ourselves or somewhere else. But what is it you really want to do? When you get to the end of this year and you look back, and you don't want to call it a resolution, but there might be something in your life that you want to be different, or you want to look different, or you really want to be able to tell that story. Like, don't look at it, like Kate said, as a resolution, but just look at it as something to work toward. And it may not be something that happens in 365 days. Like, it is okay to have bigger wishes and bigger goals. So for instance, like, my ultimate wish is to live close enough to the beach that I can walk on the beach every day, whether it be sunrise, sunset, doesn't matter, all of the above. But that is a big wish of mine that's not going to happen this year. But the goals that I'm setting in the meantime are hopefully going to help project me towards that thing that I really want. And I'm going to also make sure there's a lot of joy along the way. Because like
Mm-hmm.
you said, what if I don't have 100 years on this planet, right? I want to be able to say that I enjoyed my journey while I was here.
For
So
sure.
that is our story. What's yours going to be in this new year? Whether you choose to have it be a resolution, a goal, a wish, a dream, how are you going to make it a reality? This is your one beautiful life, and it's 100% yours to navigate. You may think you aren't committing to something, and that is okay. If you change your mind mid-year, that's okay too. You may feel exhausted after the year you just had, as I know a lot of us do, and you might need more rest. That can totally be your thing. My kids have always heard me say that the joy is in the journey. You get to decide what to work on or don't. But if you have something you're tolerating, something you feel stuck in, something you wish were different, hopefully our conversation today brought you some inspiration or perhaps a new way of thinking about New Year's resolutions. Make it fun. Make it yours. Do it in a way that feels right to you. It can be a joyful journey instead of just another obligation. Cade, any additional thoughts before you close
For
this?
I think it's just important to really remember that your goals, your resolutions, your dreams are all yours. And however you get there, however long it takes you, is all up to you. So don't think that you're limited to doing it within a certain year. You have to start at the beginning of the year, or it needs to be a certain goal that you've written down. Kind of like we talked about at the beginning of this episode, there's different ways that work for people. You can make a list, you can do a vision board, you can just manifest it in your head. You can write it down. You can paint about it. You can do whatever it is that you'd like. Whatever it is that works for you, whatever's going to help you reach that goal is just the most important thing to remember and keep in mind. What works for others is not always going to work for you. But with that being said, that is a wrap for this episode of Raising Bigs. We thank you all for listening today. We hope you found some takeaways, a fresh perspective, and maybe even an action step or two in this episode. Again, we are not experts, but we can authentically share what we're learning in hopes of making the path a little more joy-filled for those who are listening. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. Please subscribe and share with those in your circle who you think might benefit from hearing it. A new episode is released on those three platforms every single week.
You can visit my life coaching website at marcihawkinson.com or email me at lifecoachmarcy@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook at Life Coach Marcy and Instagram at life_coach_Marcy. Cade, where can our listeners find you?
My handle across all social media platforms is just at the Cade Berrigan. That's where you can find me. The best way to contact us, whether you want to give us feedback or ask any questions, is to DM either one of us on social media or to reach out on the Contact Me page on my mom's website. Again, that is marcihawkinson.com. We appreciate any feedback, topic ideas, or questions that you may like to share with us, and we will see you on the next episode of Raising Bigs.